Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Pray You Never Find a Soul. In all my experience as a ship captain, I've acted upon a plethora of stupid ideas. From boarding actions in the heat of battle to navigating asteroid fields on pure instinct. But beyond everything I've done in my time at the helm of a spacefaring vessel, there is but a single idea so terrible I would never dare attempt it again. Let me tell you, my friend, about the first and the last time I ever attempted an abduction of a Deathworlder.
What in God's name do you mean it broke the restraint?
Tok looked as though he had just seen a dead rising, his bulbous eyes darting around the room in panic.
I mean what I just said. It tore through its restraints. We tried to use the prods on it, but it didn't seem phased. We had those things turned up high enough to kill a person, and it hardly flinched. What the hell are we going to do? It's going...
I cut him off. Panic wasn't going to solve anything.
Be quiet, you shouldn't. Calm down. Where is it now?
The lack of concern I showed in that moment was probably the best thing for my crew's momentary terror, but the worst thing for the situation I'd unknowingly thrown us all into. I still dismissed the idea at the time that this could be a life or death problem. To me, it was just a minor inconvenience. Not something worth doing anything drastic over, and those damn thoughts still haunt me today. What if I understood the direness of the situation then? Perhaps I would have been able to save the others.
It's still in its cell at the moment, but when I was heading up here, it sounded like Yock and Jill were having trouble keeping it that way.
He spoke, and an unease entered my stomach, but it certainly wasn't enough to give me any pause in my reply.
No, look, if it makes you feel better, we can.
The radio suddenly burst to life.
Captain, it broke containment.
Now that was something that made me rather surprised, and the unease within me began to grow. I grabbed the transmitter to respond.
What? How? That room is made to withstand bolt rifles.
Oh God, it grabbed Yock with one of its manipulators and...
And what? Come out with it.
I could hear Johel stifling a sob on the other end.
It went for the remote and he took Yonk's arm with it.
What do you mean, took his arm?
It tore Yock's arm off. It was like pulling apart a ball of moss.
Now that finally got me worried. Before I could respond again, the transmitter was filled with the muffling screams and then nothing. Nothing but the sound of heavy footsteps. Looking back to Tok, I could see the fear in his eyes, his mouth quivering, standing there at a loss for words. It took me a few moments to process what had just happened myself, but no sooner did I understand what was happening than I told Tok to gather the crew. We would have to set an ambush. We set ourselves in a hallway between the detainment section and the ammunition storage. If that monster wanted to make it to anywhere important on the ship, it had to go through there. Besides, all the weapons were nearby too. Though I was hoping we wouldn't be needing them. The moment seemed to drag into eternity, all of us just sitting there, behind our makeshift walls and gripping our energy rifles ever tighter. But from the distance came a sound, eventually. It was a slow rhythm, every second a firm thump, and with every passing beat they grew ever louder. It was getting closer. By the time it rounded the corner, most of my crew was shaking, dreading what could have ripped one of them apart with such ease, and they were horrified by the sight. We all were. As it strode into view, it dawned on me this may be more than even the whole crew could handle. This thing stood more than double my height, and I was already abnormally large for my species. It was a biped with legs that must have been as thick as trees and covered in the bright blue blood that I could only assume was from Yock. And the arms of that creature, they looked as though they were made of steel. The muscles bulged against the skin. And the more I looked, the greater the fear beneath my heart built. The whole body was the same, imposing and stone. Atop the head was a tuft of grey hair, frayed and rough. But finally, I looked to the eyes, green and empty as they were. It seemed as though this thing was incapable of emotion. I didn't understand then that those were not empty eyes, but rather, I think they were eyes simply of confusion. It stood there still, looking across all of us, weapons at the ready, prepared to fire on my command. But I was first turned to talk and spoke quickly.
Take a few and dismount a bolt rifle from the firing position, set it up behind the door to our rear, and be ready. If nothing else, that'll take the monster down.
He nodded and grabbed 3 others with him, leaving the rest of us to our fate. I turned back towards the creature in the doorway, locking eyes with it, and then I screamed my command, "Fire!" The roar of all the energy rifles was absolutely deafening, but for all the show, I let the doubt seep into my mind.
It's going to get up. This isn't enough.
But for the moment, the creature had curled into a ball, impossibly small, and the plasma streaks melted its skin, scorching whatever the heat touched. But then came a mighty roar, deafening above even the blaster fire, and the monster looked up from its ball, with eyes filled with hate, burning fury. It moved faster than I thought any living thing could. In 2 strides, it was upon the first barricades, and it jumped over them as though crossing a small stream. Without a loss of momentum, it spun one leg, swiping out with the back of its manipulator, crushing 3 of my crew in a single instant. Though I couldn't hear the strike over the other energy weapons, I could see all 3 of them slam into the wall next to each other, going limp on impact. The rest of the crew began to waver, stepping back, letting up their fire. A mistake. The creature took advantage of the pause in the relentless fire to push forward, smashing its way through my helpless crew, all splattered over the wall, the floor, the ceiling, and one another. Unstoppable. It was then that my spirit too broke, and I fled the screams, the tremendous slaughter in the hall. I ran out the door to where Tok had gone and sealed the entrance behind me. Before me, Tok and the others looked back towards me filled with fear, still placing a bolt rifle onto the new mount.
"Sir, what happened to—"
"Hurry, get that thing ready to fire," I cut him off. There was no time to answer his questions. Our survival depended on this equipment now.
"I don't know how much time we have until—"
I was interrupted by a tremendous sound, the crunch of metal. I turned back to the sealed door, slowly, and what met my gaze filled me with true dread. In the bulkhead was a massive dent, near to the size of one of the monster's manipulators. The door would not hold. How could we expect it to? I hurried the few survivors to cock the weapon, the massive ropes taking all of the strength to pull back, while I waited facing the door, with dents growing ever larger, ever deeper. Not a moment after we were ready to fire, the door finally gave way, and out stepped a horror, splattered in blood, the blue mixing with the dark red on the ends of its manipulators. One of its eyes had a combat knife planted firmly in it. Someone has truly given it a good attempt, but the damn thing just refused to kneel. "Shoot it, damn it, shoot it!" And Tok let a single bolt fly. The bolt hit the creature just to the right of what I think was the center mass, embedding itself deep into the monster's chest. Finally, something made the thing stop. It looked down and grasped the end of the bolt, hardly sticking out beyond the skin, and he fell to a knee, denting the floor with the force of its weight. The creature's breathing became noticeably more labored. It spit a massive puddle of dark red onto the floor before me. For a brief moment, I let hope flood my head. Maybe we could survive this after all. But the hope was dashed quickly as it came. Its head lifted again, a droplet of water cutting through the blood on its cheek, draining from its remaining eye. And it stood again. Christ! In spite of the obvious pain, the blood running from its jaws, the fecker stood again, letting off a roar even greater than the first, so loud that my eardrums burst. It moved forwards again, still blisteringly fast, and picked up the bolt rifle, although it was a toy. It threw the rifle with incredible force into the remaining crew. Only Tok and I had the luck to avoid being bodied by the contraption. Sadly, though, Tok's luck finally ran out too. Before he could so much as scream, the monster grabbed him by the legs, crushing him in its fist,
Then grabbing hold of Tock's neck, it lifted him above its head and pulled. Though my hearing was shot by this point, the sound of someone being ripped in two was loud enough that it didn't really matter. Like wood being crushed and torn by a chipper, that thing ripped Tock clean in half. And even if I couldn't hear the last cries, the image of his face in sheer agony has stuck with me for many years. I don't think it's something I could ever truly forget. Though, by this point, the creature was beginning to slow. I was far too panicked to really take notice. My head was swimming, burning through any ideas I had left. And then it hit me. Vent the ship. It has to work. Nothing could survive the vacuum. Anything that breathes, at least. And that thing did. It clearly did. So I turned and ran. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't even bother to shut the bulkheads behind me. And with every passing instant, the creature's steps were getting louder. Thump, 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 thump. Finally, I reached the bridge. I spun around to seal the door behind me, and there it stood, just in front of me, blood streaming from its mouth like a river. But there it stood. It took one more step, and again, as it was when it first struck it, faltered to a knee. Its manipulator reached out and grabbed me by the neck, and I felt its grab tighten for a moment. But then it loosened. The fire in its eyes had finally faded, and its grip on me slowly died. As it fell to the floor, so too did I collapse, passing out from sheer exhaustion and panic. When I woke, I was greeted by that cold eye, dead, but still looking, watching me. I left that system, and I burned the map. I left no way back, and this is my warning to you. Never should you seek out those monsters. Hope you never find their home. Pray that you never find Soul. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.